motion. Mostert gets the call. On that second down and 5. In motion. Thompson looking for an escape match. Big giant win over Green Bay. It opens. And the reverse fill. Slides. And he's down inside the 11-yard line. Craycraft in motion. 8th play of the drive. First and 10 from the 12. Mostert. It's a foot race there with Johnson. Wow! Turn the corner. He's in for 6. On a 29-yard line after the punt. It is first and 10. Gaskin dodging defenders. Getting a block from Hill. Mostert. Yep, there they go. Looking for a block. He got one from Hill into the secondary. Gesicki, the tight end. 9th play of the drive. Second and 10. Down the middle they go. And that's caught at the 10-yard line. 80 on the ground. First and 10. Mostert. Engel to block. And now he's off to the races. Into the second.
All right, and welcome back to DolFan Radio. I'm joined with Rodney Quick in Pennsylvania, and live with me right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on the beautiful Intercoastal Waterway is a new co-host, Jonathan Elliott. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to
welcome.
be here.
And I mean, too bad that the first show that you're joining us for, we have to talk about a stinking loss to the stinking Jets, but that is what happened. And I'm going to go right into it. We've been talking about this, and it's been something I think everybody's been talking about all week. Who's picking the spotters? Because Teddy Bridgewater, nobody has seen the stumble.
No camera angle anywhere.
Nobody can produce the stumble, but yet some spotters said, oh, he stumbled, so they take him out under the new concussion protocol rules after the first play of the game, which, by the way, was an intentional grounding for a safety. And he was being hit, which changed the direction of the ball.
Makes
so that
it
makes it non-intentional. So I hate to be a conspiracy theorist because we all know what happened to Alex Jones last week, but this isn't as serious as Alex Jones. So, I mean, who's picking the spotters? Rodney?
I'd like to know that as well. As I'm really not even sure what to say because, like I said before we went on the air, I saw 3 different angles of it, and Teddy wasn't stumbling at all. He looked as surprised as anybody when he had to come out of the game.
But and the funny thing to me is the more we think about it, here we are on the road against the hated Jets. Is this spotter? Was he an employee of the Jets? Because it's just so strange. We've already lost Tua to concussion protocol, and then on the first play of the game, on the stumble that never was.
Never
now
happened.
We lose Teddy Bridgewater.
And he never seemed to find the concussion with Braxton Berrios when he got hit at the end of the game.
Exactly. Can't find that one. Nobody called. So I think what we're going to do, and this is what I'm going to propose to the National Football League, is that all of the fans in the stadium are going to be given an app on their phone, and we're all going to be spotters. And so by the end of the game, nobody's going to be playing.
That's about it.
Good way to fix it. Okay.
Oh, we'll get the call of the day quicker.
And we'll bring in our fantasy guru here in a little while, and he can chime in on that too, because that's going to cost him points with everybody in the stands going, "Oh, he stumbled. Nope, he wobbled. Nope, nope." All right, so let's get down to the serious business at hand. The game. I jumped on a lot of the fans, and I made the statement on DolFan Radio, and I'll make that statement again. Everybody was on the Skylar Thompson bandwagon heading into last week. There was a lot of people that actually, you can think about it, a lot of people were actually rooting against Teddy Bridgewater just because they wanted to see Skylar Thompson. And then because Skylar Thompson didn't win the game and he didn't light up the scoreboards, all of a sudden everybody wants to jump all over Skylar Thompson and we got to get rid of him. He's a 7th-round draft pick, cut him, and
Reed sent it all over again.
Exactly. Jonathan, you and I had a discussion about this earlier in the week. Tell everybody exactly what you thought of Skylar Thompson and the way that he played and the reason that he looked a little off compared to what we saw in the preseason.
Well, what it is Skylar Thompson never had any practice reps with the ones all throughout the season. I mean, he's been taking reps with the 2s and 3s for the most part, not even the 2s, not until Tua went out. So he has no repetition, no continuity with Tyreek and Jalen, Cedric Wilson. So he
And
needs
it
to have timing
wasn't a part of the game planning last week
at all.
It had not worked because Teddy Bridgewater was getting the bulk of the work. Now, Rodney, do you think now that he's been named a starter for this week, even though Bridgewater could technically be coming back and be the backup? If that doesn't happen, then we've got Reed Sinnett as the backup. Do you think, though, that now that he's had a week to actually be part of the game planning, he's actually been working with Jalen Waddle, he's been working with Tyreek Hill and Gesicki and all of the other starters, do you think we're going to see a totally different Skyler?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Like that was a perfect point. He spent most of the preseason working with 2s and 3s. All that showed was our 2s and 3s were better than the other team's 2s and 3s in the games that he was in. So he's going to have a week of practice with, like you said, Tyreek, Gesicki, Jalen Waddle. It can only help him to have a better game. I didn't think he played that badly considering the situation last week.
I didn't think he played that bad either. And if you think about it, we were in the game up until about 9 minutes to go. That's when it kind of got away from us.
I almost took the lead if Jason Sanders didn't miss that field goal.
Absolutely. Yep. We would have taken the lead. And here's the thing. And this is what I told everybody on the DolFan Radio page at Facebook. I said, y'all were clamoring for this guy in the preseason, but you got to understand something. He was playing against second and third teamers. The game is slower in the preseason to begin with. And the second and third teamers and those bubble guys, they're a lot slower than the guys that you were playing against on Sunday. And when it's Sundays and the actual lights are on and the games count, the game is even faster than it was in the preseason, which is a lot faster than what they were used to in college. So I think we're going to be able to see it a lot different. And he said something this week about, they always talk about it, and he needed to be able to move his feet faster.
Yeah. So when he has pressure in the pocket, seems not to be able to set it. And
that makes sense. Yeah. So you need to be, So he's not setting his feet right. He's
not
still
picking up
dancing as he's trying to throw the ball.
He's not picking up the blitz fast enough. And once he picks it up, he can't set his feet. And then he's throwing off his back foot.
And we did see that a lot, which would actually explain the reason why he had a lot of the underthrows. I did think he made some bad decisions as far as where ball placement, throwing into coverage, throwing into tighter coverages than he probably should have thrown into, and forcing it. And I think, though, what I said all along was that here was a kid, kind of like a deer caught in the headlights sort of thing, thrust into a game due to an injury. You haven't worked with these guys. Now you're going to go out there and lead these guys. And I think he tried to do a little bit too much. I think he thought, he tried to pull his inner Dan Marino.
Yeah, I think he was trying to prove the preseason stats right.
I think he was trying to do that. And I think he was trying to say, okay, I'm going to take this team. I'm going to put this team on my shoulders and I'm going to will them to victory. And when you try to do that, sometimes it backfires.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're putting too much, unbeknownst to you, you're actually putting too much pressure on yourself. But I think on Sunday, I think we're going to see an absolute different Skylar Thompson. I think we're going to be impressed. I'm not going to say that we're going to get the win because we're still going to have the same problem. Although X-Man is going to be in the game, although we're still missing Byron Jones. We are, last week, you think about it, I said this too. We were without QB1, QB2,
yep,
CB1, CB2, and LT1. And actually, you think about it,
RT1.
And RT1, because Austin Jackson was hurt. He is going to be playing tomorrow. He's not starting. We don't think he's starting, but he is back. He is healthy, supposedly, so he is available. The offensive line, and Rodney, chime in here, because the offensive line has really actually been good up until last week, and obviously we missed. We're kind of missing. We're kind of missing Austin Jackson.
Yeah.
And last week when Armstead went out, that proved to really be the final nail in the coffin for us as far as last week was concerned. But what's your take, Jonathan, on our offensive line play so far this year?
Well, right now in pass blocking, I think we rank 32nd in the league, and I think we're in the 20s in run blocking. And left guard is definitely a liability right now, I feel. I don't think Liam Eichenberg is really holding his own and developing the way I would like. But
do you think that's a case, though? And Rodney, do you think that's a case of the fact that we had Liam Eichenberg over there at left tackle so much last year?
It could have been, but, we have a really solid offensive line coach that has been working with these guys, all preseason, all during OTAs. And I don't know. I mean, could be a hangover from last year where he was at a different spot, but I agree. I don't think he's really holding his own.
Jonathan, what would you do different? Do you see anything maybe in the technique? And I know this is the times that we miss John, because John, being a former offensive lineman, he can sit here and talk exactly what's going on. And, you got to slide, you got to do this, you got to cover your gaps, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see anything though that stands out to you that just seems like it's completely off as far as technique?
Maybe pre-snap, just looking at the defenders pre-snap and trying to see what they're doing
and figuring out where the defenders are coming from and who you need to get your blocks off.
Really understanding the blitzes and all that.
Sure. So then that comes down, then at that point, I think that comes down to your center position, because it's the center is the guy that's going to give those assignments.
And we have a first-time center right now as well.
Yeah. So we probably got a few growing pains. I would say that I have seen, I didn't realize that our stats showed that we were 32nd and 20th. But, I mean, you got to look at Tua, what he was able to do. And this is going to bring us back to Tua. People have been asking me all week, is Tua coming back? Is Tua the guy? I continue to get that question now. And obviously, if Tua didn't have the concussion on that Thursday night game, which, John was adamant going into that Thursday night game at Cincinnati that Tua should not have played. John was also adamant that there was several other guys that if they're banged up a little bit, this is not the time. So we're 3-0. We don't need to prove anything and go to 4-0, because in today's NFL, somebody going undefeated, probably not going to happen.
Yeah, very highly unlikely.
So John said, this is a meaningless game. We need to be able to beat Cincinnati later in the season, not in game 4 on 4 days, actually less than 4 days rest, if you think about it. So, but here, so anyway, so the injury happens. Tua gets knocked to the turf. Why that wasn't roughing the passer, I don't know. But now he's in concussion protocol, and here we go again, the human potato chip. Okay. Or as I call him, the Patua chip. So, is he the guy? I mean, I hate to bring this out, and if Tua ever sees this show, please don't hate me. But the thing is, he's too small. He's not a prototypical quarterback. He's small. He's 6 foot, barely weighs 200 pounds, I think.
About the same size as Drew Brees.
And he hasn't, exactly. And about the same size as Russell Wilson, that's a bad comparison, because those guys have had success.
Well, Russell Wilson's a bit bulkier than the two of them. Yeah.
Yes.
So he can take a hit better than they can.
Yeah.
But Drew Brees' career, if you look at it earlier, and he was getting hurt.
Well, it's when he tore the labrum in his shoulder, and that was the reason that the team doctors in Miami didn't sign off on Drew Brees becoming a Dolphin. And Nick Saban saying, "Oh, I was following what the doctors were telling me," when I call BS on that, is you're the head coach. If you wanted Drew Brees, you really wanted him, you could have said to the doctors, "I want this guy.
Yeah,
get him in here." Because I would have taken Brees' shoulder over Culpepper's knee any day.
Any day.
Absolutely.
And I remember, Rodney, that season we were talking about that very subject that season. And why is it? This is something that just really irks me year in and year out with this Dolphins team, because if you remember any bit of that season, we were doing DolFan Radio and we were taking call-ins, and we're going to be able to set that up eventually again. We were taking call-ins, and I remember I was playing a sound clip of Colonel Potter from the TV show MASH, where he's going, "MASH 4077." And that's how we were answering the calls, because we were a walking MASH unit. And it seems like every year in and year out, we have these nagging injuries.
Yeah.
You had the nagging injuries with Mike Wallace, Brandon Marshall. I mean, the list goes, Devontae Parker.
Oh,
I mean, talk about
every year, hamstring.
His middle name was nagging injury.
Hamstring from hell.
Rodney, I see you laughing there. So give us your take on that.
I was just thinking of a side note as far as you were talking about Drew Brees, how Nick Saban decided to go with Culpepper's knee over Drew Brees. That's the second time we could have had Drew Brees. When he was drafted, we could have taken him, but I believe we took a bum named Jamar Fletcher at cornerback. So we have nobody to blame but ourselves.
We could do this a lot.
We could sit here all night long and take a 1 hour show and turn it into a 10-hour show talking about
we could have had.
the quarterbacks we could have had, from Matty Ryan all the way to Drew Brees and some others. And then not only that, just talk about bad. I remember one of the other things that used to really drive me nuts is the Dolphins. We were always that one player away.
Always.
We were Mike Wallace away. Mike Wallace, Brandon Marshall away from the Super Bowl. Nope, we're going to go get Ndamukong Suh. We're going to give him the highest contract of a defensive tackle in the National Football League's history, and he's going to get us to the Super Bowl. What happened with that?
Yeah, they're always looking at just one player away and investing too much in players that it's a quarterback is what you really need to invest in.
That's what you need to invest in. Bill Parcells had it right. Bill Parcells said, I need a left tackle. I got to have the quarterback. Okay. But I need the left tackle that's going to protect that quarterback. Then I need a shutdown corner
and an edge rusher.
And that's it. And then the rest of it, I think, if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, I would say the Philadelphia Eagles are probably about the most complete team on the offensive line and on the defensive line. Their defensive line is equally
one of the
as
best
good.
teams in the trenches.
Yeah. And so it all happens up front. It all happens in the trenches. We've never been able to put together that offensive line. If you look at the teams that go to the Super Bowl or get through the playoffs and make it to the Super Bowl and win a championship, they have great offensive and defensive lines.
Yeah, every year it seems like the offensive line is an issue. Every year. And it's not just Rodney. It's not just, it's not just Bullygate. It's the team is not there. And then last year, I mean, I'm sorry, but we had Pepe Le Pew as the offensive line coach, and that was horrible. First time O-line coach.
Yeah. Rodney?
Yeah. I mean, every year the offensive line seems to be one of our major Achilles heels. We can't keep 5 guys healthy together to save our lives.
Well, and then you add in all the other injuries. We always end up having some nagging injury to a receiver, to a cornerback, or another defensive back or the linebacker. Somebody's always what is going on in the Dolphins training room?
I have no idea. Every year seems like we're cursed with injuries.
And we're not, and I understand the National Football League injuries are a part of the game, and every team has to deal with it. But it seems to me that the Dolphins, especially, it's just up and down the roster of guys missing way too much time. And that has to come back. I want to look at the training room. I want to look at the head trainer and see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It starts there. You've got to have these guys in tip-top shape. It's a brutal atmosphere down there. You really have to take care of these guys when they're training.
And I've been in the training facility. It's not like they don't have all of the best weights and equipment in the world available to them. Now, I'm going to say one thing. I don't know if you guys saw this story or not, but Tyreek Hill, who's one of the captains. All right. So the Dolphins decided that they wanted to have some ping pong tables put into the training facility so that it would help the guys bond during, more lighthearted moments and so on and so forth. Well, they lasted through the 3-0. And now in the midst of a 2-game losing streak, Tyreek Hill basically went to Coach McDaniel and said, me and the other captains, we've had a conversation and we want the ping pong tables gone. We want to concentrate on football and studying film and getting good as a team and a unit.
I think that came out Monday about the ping pong table. And I think around Wednesday or Thursday, Tyreek Hill came out and said, no, we're just upgrading it. We're getting a new one. The ping pong gate.
Well, I'm not exactly sure because I read that article yesterday when I was in the airport in Las Vegas getting ready to come down here, and it seemed to me like it's definitely gone because McDaniel in his press conference said he was glad to see that the guys stepped up. And that's what leadership is all about. So.
Yeah, I was reading that, and then I just read an article not too long ago that said they were bringing in a new one, upgraded. Wasn't up to par, I guess.
Well, I guess we'll find out. But I think if the losing continues, ping pong gate's probably going to end up being. Gate. That's it. So we've had Bully Gate. Now we got ping pong gate. Oh, and we also have concussion gate. When's it going to stop? I mean, it's Miami Gate. Let's just call it Miami Gate. That's the Dolphins.
That covers everything
going on down there. All right. Okay. Let's let's move on real quick here before at the end of the show, we're going to do our picks for this week's game. But I want to go ahead and move on and do our preview of the Vikings game. So the Vikings coming in, what are they?
4-1.
4-1. Okay. So the Vikings come in that's right. Vikings come in at 4-1. Dolphins have now fallen to 3-2. The Dolphins are at home. They're home dogs, 3 points.
Yes, sir.
Is this, I mean, is that warranted? Considering, I think
We should definitely be the underdogs, saying that we have a third string quarterback right now making his first start.
absolutely. I understand that point, and I get it but we're at home. But
3
then again,
points
we
seems kinda
have,
fair.
but then we have, well, actually, if you give us home field advantage, we're losing even more than that. I think the worst part of it is, and I'm still not sure, but the Dolphins have done this to themselves because again, they've shot themselves in their own foot.
Yeah.
They're not able to convince Las Vegas, the odds makers, that they're for real. They end up, I mean, how many times have we started out 3-0? We did this under Adam Gase, head Gase. I always called him head Gase because he was an absolute head case.
Yeah.
We started out 3-0 with him, and then what did we do? We didn't make the playoffs, and he was gone. How many times have we done this?
3-0. I mean, usually we come off to a slow start the last few years.
Every
slow
once
start,
in a while,
and
we
then
get
come
those
on towards
fast
the end.
starts.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, this is the first time I can
I
remember.
don't think
in a
we
few
did
years.
3-0 with Philbin. I think we did a 2-1, didn't we, with Philbin?
I think so. That sounds about
And
right.
then all
I
of a
don't think
sudden-
we did one with Flores either.
Flores, we had, well, last year
starts.
was the debacle. Last year was the worst.
1-8.
The 1-8, just incredible. And I don't want to, and that's kind of what I started thinking. Oh God, here we go again.
Yeah.
We had so much hope when we beat New England last year, and then of course to get destroyed by Buffalo in week 2. This year we turned that around. We start out 3-0, and we go shoot ourselves in the foot. Because as I said, Rodney, John didn't think that we should have started hardly any of the guys that we started in that Cincinnati game on less than, if you think about it, less than 4 days of rest.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We should have definitely sat Xavier Howard. We should have definitely sat, probably Teron Armstead as well.
We should have sat Tua.
Yeah, should have. Well, that goes without saying. Yeah, he shouldn't have been playing. Should have been Teddy.
Despite whether or not he passed concussion protocol, the fact that he said that he had back and
Back and
ankle injuries should just sat him. It's like we just said, and John talked about it to me, and even posted it on Facebook. He said, "This is a meaningless game. It's week 4. What are we trying to prove?
Get healthy and come back next week."
Exactly.
If you would have sat those 3 guys against Cincinnati, the Jet game would have been a different story.
Oh, we'd have pulled it off.
And the Jet game almost was a different story. Had Armstead not gone out, had Sanders made the kick to give us the lead.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, if not for the anonymous spotter, we got to find out who the spotter is.
Yeah, somebody's got to tell us. They're not going to tell us though.
We need to assign our special investigative reporter to go and find out who that spotter was.
We need a spotter to find the spotter.
We're going to start up a whole new career path here for a lot of people just by being spotters in the National Football League. Let's bring in, I want to bring in our fantasy guru because obviously, I mean, he handles the fantasy stuff. He's also our producer. And Bobby Blackjack, come on in here. We want to get your take on the whole spotter issue and just get you involved in this conversation with us.
Hey, fellas, how are you?
Hey, Bobby.
Yeah, I think the spotter is going to be tough for you guys to get over that little hump, I guess, right? Because you 2 weeks in a row, you've 3 weeks in a row, because the first week was the Tua's first hit, then it was the second hit, then it was Bridgewater last week. So that's going to be a tough issue for Dolphins fans to kind of get over because it's kind of bit you in the butt 3 times. But what's happening now, it's happening across the board. Now you're starting to see other players now. All right, they get hit in the head, they're done. Like we saw with Teddy Bridgewater last week. He got the hit. You guys said earlier in the show that the hit wasn't that bad, at least not on video. But because it was a quarterback who was the focal point of every team, if something bad happens to them, they're going to be, shoot away for a little while and see if anything's wrong, which is a shame because that's going to, of course, and, speaking of fantasy football, in my one league that I'm 0-5 in, because I had Russell Wilson as quarterback, I put in Teddy Bridgewater. And he was gone after one play, so I knew I was done that game. I didn't bother to check on my team until yesterday.
I'm actually, and I'm a Dolphin fan, obviously. Bobby, don't ever start any Dolphins. It just never works out in fantasy football.
Unless it's Tyreek or Jalen.
Yeah.
Jalen last year, he was phenomenal.
Do you think like I think though, because here the Dolphins, obviously they're going to roll as well as Tua rolls.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, tuna roll. We got to start calling him tuna. Then we roll as far as the tuna roll. So we already had the tuna though running the football operations. If we lose him again, let's say he comes back. Let's say he comes back next week against Pittsburgh. We have him for a couple of games, and God forbid he takes another hit, and he's out for even just 3 games. That could tank our season.
Well, the best ability is availability.
Yeah. Well, and I've always said it. Rodney, you can back me up on this. I've always said that your only worth to our football team is your ability to stay on the field. If you can't be on the field, then what are we paying you for? It's like Will Fuller.
Yeah. Oh,
who lived down the street down here, by the way.
Did he?
Yeah.
Saw more here than
my landlord here, Orrin, knew him because he was his landlord.
Oh, wow.
So he was just telling me that tonight. Will Fuller lived here, and Orrin's going to the game. He does have season tickets, and he's not really all that up on football, but he likes to go, and he's learning the game a little bit more. But he did know about Will Fuller, and he said, "Yeah, what did he? $10 million, and he what 10 plays, and he was done."
That's a nice payday.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll go in there and get beat up for 10 plays for $10 million and then retire. I'll burn my money that I have now and retire. All right. So coming in against, and we'll get to the fantasy corner on this as well. We're going to go ahead and cover the Dolphins with Minnesota coming into town. Bobby, give us your take from the fantasy standpoint of this game.
I think, again, your uncertainty at quarterback this weekend. I think from a fantasy standpoint, a lot of your points are going to come from your opponent. I think Kirk Cousins is playing very well this year. The team is 4-1. Justin Jefferson is one of your top wide receivers in the league. Dalvin Cook is always solid as a running back. The one thing that I see from the Dolphins is that they're giving the ball to Mostert, I believe, more. So I think he is your right now. He's your bell cow running back.
They started to give it to him a lot more last week, and I think we were talking about that, Jonathan and I, before the show, and we were saying that they really need to make him the focal point of the offense so we can open up the play action pass.
Yeah, they really need to establish the run, to soften the coverage, and make it easier on Skyler.
Yeah, and that would absolutely make it easier on the kid. Would you on a flyer, Bobby? Would you actually entertain the thought of actually starting a guy like Skylar Thompson? This is one of those games that you never know.
The only way you would start a quarterback, and hey, that goes from my guy Daniel Jones or my other guy Kenny Pickett. The only way you would start those guys at that level of quarterback play is if you're in one of those crazy ass leagues where you start 2 quarterbacks. So quarterbacks are hard to come by. So then you're almost forced to play those 3rd, 4th level guys. But I think Minnesota's defense is pretty formidable, and like I said, they're coming into your stadium on a warm day from the north, and they're 3-point favorites.
Well, and I don't like that. I understand it though.
Yeah.
I certainly understand why we are 3-point home dogs, because we don't impress Las Vegas. We haven't been able to prove that. 2 weeks ago, the Dolphins were rated as the number 1 team in the power rankings, only because they were undefeated and the fact that they put Philadelphia at number 2. Philadelphia now obviously the number 1 team, I would say, because they're still undefeated. But
yeah,
the Dolphins have really fallen off, and there are people out there right now that are talking about Mike McDaniel's not going to survive this concussion protocol.
That has nothing to do with Mike McDaniel.
But it's the stupidest thing. And Stephen A. Smith, shut your mouth. I'm so sick and tired of listening to Stephen A. Smith.
Exactly.
Stephen A. Smith said that Tua should retire and sue the Miami Dolphins.
Ridiculous.
So again, Stephen A. Smith, just STFU. I can't stand him. I cannot stand that guy. Do you like him at all?
No.
Rodney?
I hate his guts. I never liked the guy.
More of a Shannon
He's
Sharp.
horrible.
Yeah. What about you, Bobby?
I mean, he's really against my Brooklyn Nets, on the basketball side of things. So no, I'm usually against them 90% of the time.
But the thing, and that's the thing, because he thinks he's an expert on everything, and he's not. It's like the jack of all trades, but a master of none. That is Stephen A. Smith. Okay. And he also, I'll tell you who he really reminds me of. Skip Clueless.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
I couldn't stand Skip Bayless. And
I agree.
That's who Stephen A. Smith reminds me of.
I mean,
Just
yeah,
up
again,
there running his mouth to be heard.
Yeah, like you said, he wants to have his dabble in all these different sports and thinks he's the expert. Stick with one sport. That's why I trust those guys on, the NBA panel. When you have Shaq, you got Barkley. Those guys, I'd pay to watch those guys talk football. So at least they stick with one sport and that's it. Steve Renee's got to just shoot his mouth everywhere.
Yeah, well, he has that. I guess you would call it a complex kind of where he kind of just feels like he has to insert his very arrogant. Thank you.
Yeah,
arrogant is the word. So that's the word of the day. Arrogant. You heard it here on DolFan Radio. All right, back to the fantasy corner. Anything else interesting as far as matchups with the Dolphins and the Vikings before we move on to the rest of the games?
No, I think like I said, I think it's a Viking heavy usage as far as this matchup is concerned, aside from the running back. Again, I mean,
you use a whole lot of the Dolphins. You can't really use a whole lot of the Dolphins' strength because that's their defense, and they're still banged up on defense pretty bad.
Yeah, defense hasn't been up to par at all this year so far.
And you know what? It's kind of a crapshoot too, because if you're an owner of Tyreek Hill or if you're an owner of Waddle, even they're taking a step back now because you don't know who the quarterback is going to favor.
Well, and they're also nursing injuries. Hill left the game last week with a walking boot on.
Yep.
And they were both limited in practice last week leading up to the Jets game with some nagging injuries going in. So, and then you throw in the fact we got a third string quarterback, and some spotter is going to take him out. What do you figure by play
Halfway
number 3?
Maybe halfway
You
through.
go about halfway through the game, and then we got Reed Sinnett comes in.
And one thing is that's almost a certainty in fantasy football. The only time you play Mike Gesicki is when Waddle is out, because he seems to get a lot more looks. Bless you. He gets a lot more looks when Waddle is out. Then you'll see a decent game by Gesicki.
All right. Let's move on. What's your next game? What are we looking at?
Let's go right to the premier. There's 2 big games of the week. First one at 4:25. You got the Bills at the Chiefs. As you mentioned before, home underdogs for the first time. Personally, for me, like I said, I have an 0-5 team. I also have a 5-0 team and a 4-1 team. And my 5-0 team is quarterbacked by Josh Allen. My 4-1 team is quarterbacked by Patrick Mahomes. I just want to sit back on Sunday with a nice Bloody Mary next to me and watch the points add up. Because I want a shootout because it'll benefit both of my teams at that point.
I think that's going to be a shootout, but I think Buffalo's going to take – I think Buffalo has the advantage in that game. But, Jonathan, weren't you telling me before the show that this is the first time in 41 games that Mahomes is a home underdog?
Yeah, I think everybody's expecting some kind of revenge from what happened, in the playoffs. Which really, I mean, who cares about a regular season game? That revenge you want to see in January, not now.
Well, and that goes to exactly what John was saying, going into the week 4 game against the Bengals. By the way, I want to backtrack on that because I told everybody I was going to say my piece on the Thursday night games. If you want to have the Thursday night games, don't have them until every team starts their bye week.
100%.
And then once you have the bye weeks, that'll give you 2 Thursday night games. And the teams that just had their bye will then play on Thursday night. Because they've already had that rest. It gives them a little extra rest. And it still gives them even a little bit more rest going into the next week to get onto their regular schedule. But don't have teams play on Sunday and then have to turn around, because it's not fair to the players from a safety standpoint. NFL, you want to talk about player safety? Stop making them go out and play Thursday night games with less than 4 days rest, especially after a game like the Dolphins had against the Bills.
Yeah.
There were several Bills players that were quoted in the news that week that said they didn't even, after that brutal game in Miami with that heat and the intensity of that game, they didn't even start feeling like themselves until Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I personally would do away with the Thursday games altogether.
Well, and I think it just, I think it seems to reason if the NFL is that concerned about player safety, that they should get rid of those games. Or like I said, if you really absolutely want to have Thursday night football, and now you're going to get 2 games, make sure it's all the teams coming off of their buys. But I don't know how you would actually
I like
do
that
that
idea. I heard somebody else suggest that, and I think that's the best way to go, honestly.
Now it is a
They're
bit
not
of
going to
a,
get rid of Thursday night games because of revenue.
no, but it is
Make
a
it too
little
much
bit of
money.
it is a little bit of a, I guess a scheduling conflict in a way, but they could figure it out to where, you have 2 teams, obviously, from the AFC East would sit out. That would be their bye. And then you have 2 teams from the NFC East, and that's their bye. And then the next week on the Thursday night game, those 2 teams, they play each other. There you have your divisional games. I think they could figure, the schedule makers are smart enough. They could figure that out. And then we wouldn't have, because I really think you're putting the players in an awful lot of danger, making them come out and play on 4 days rest.
100%.
And not only that, but you're putting both of the teams at a disadvantage, having to come out in 4 days. The coaches, they don't sleep at all that week. The coaches barely sleep anyway during the regular season. Now you got 4 days.
Work about 90 hours a week.
Exactly. Now you've got 4 days, basically 3 days to put your game plan together, because Thursday you're probably traveling, or you might be traveling on Wednesday night, depending on how far away the game is. So you're at the facility 24/7 on that week that you're having to play on Thursday, and you're still not able to implement your entire game plan. There's just no way.
Not healthy, not a proper game plan. It's not enough time.
It's just a bad idea, and I think it's something that the NFL, if you want to have Thursday night games, just go ahead and you got to rethink this. All right, next game up on fantasy.
And real quick, to your Thursday night football point, the only reason anybody's watching, unless you're a team of the home of the teams playing, is fantasy football. These past 2 weeks have been awful games, awful matchups, boring football you're watching. The only reason you're watching, though, is fantasy football, or obviously sports betting.
Or to see if one of the players is going to get arrested for assault.
Oh boy. I think the other game of the weekend, I have Sunday night, which I'll be looking forward to watching as a Giant fan, because someone will get knocked off. 2 teams I hate an awful lot would be Cowboys at Eagles. I think there's a lot of fantasy implications in that game. I happen to have CeeDee Lamb. He's questionable. I think he hurt himself in practice this week, so you're going to watch that. Before the season, there was a lot of talk of Jalen Hurts being a top flight fantasy quarterback, and first 5 weeks he has done so. But now he goes against an interdivisional opponent who know each other very well, and Cowboys do have a pretty damn good defense.
And those the divisional rivals, those are always the tough games.
Always.
Those are the ones. I live in Las Vegas, and I love to bet on football, and I just stay away from division games. I've been bitten so many times. I remember, I think the one time that I decided I was not going to bet on teams that were playing from within the same division was when Pittsburgh and Cincinnati had that really wild game back in 2014 or 2015. And I just said, that's it, because you can't, it's like at the very end of the game, I had it covered, and then all of a sudden Pittsburgh scored and it was done. And there was a whole bunch of other bettors that were the same way. And of course, all of the executives behind, the sports books counters were going, woohoo. But all of us bettors, we sat there and thought, we've got this one locked up. And then all of a sudden you had that fumble and Pittsburgh went down and got the score to change the points. So it's always tough with those divisional games because of the rivalry. And how many times do you see a divisional game? These are teams like the Bills, okay? And this isn't a divisional rivalry tomorrow, but you got the Bills and the Chiefs. These are two teams that usually put up a lot of points on everybody. And we're all sitting here thinking that's going to be a scoring fest tomorrow. It could very well turn out, and this is what divisional games usually end up turning out to be, is usually the 13-10 defensive slugfest.
God, no. Please. God, no.
I don't see that happening with the Chiefs and the Bills.
I don't either with the Chiefs and the Bills. Somebody's
going
to
teams right there. They score.
Yeah. I see the Chiefs and the Bills before it ends up being a 13-10 defensive slugfest. It's going to be a lopsided game one way or the other.
Could be. I mean, look what happened last week against the Raiders. He's down, 24-14, 24-0 or something? He was down, or what was he down, Mahomes, last week? Early.
No, he was down 20-10 at halftime.
Yeah, it was, but he was down and came back. Yeah. Which
Yeah. And there begs a question, and it goes away from fantasy. I know we're in the fantasy corner at this point, but you got to look at, was that the right call at the end of the game to go for two?
No.
Thank you. I would have kicked the field goal. Let's take it into overtime. Yeah, let's go to overtime. Let's see if we can win it.
I mean, Roddy?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was just the craziest thing to watch. I mean, they had 4.5 minutes to go. And you know what? The defense stopped them anyway.
Yeah.
So you would I mean, between football and baseball with these analytics and it's I don't know. It's killing. It's killing.
Well, I don't like the analytics, and Bill Cowher said it best. He said this of the Baltimore Ravens going for the touchdown in that game against the Bills. He said, you have to, as a head coach, I don't want to follow the analytics. I don't care what the analytics say. I'm not gonna put my career, and I'm not gonna put the win-loss record of my team at the whim of some analytical statistic. Okay, I'm the head coach. I'm gonna go by my gut. I'm gonna go by my gut, what I'm seeing on the field, how I see my guys reacting to situations, how they're performing, and I'm gonna kick that field goal, and we're gonna kick it off, and then I'm gonna look at my defense, and I'm gonna tell them, look, you go out and win this game for us now.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you really want to make the games more exciting, then get rid of that 10-yard rule on onside kicks. Make it 5 yards, then it's a free for all at that point.
Oh, that would
be nice.
Maybe the analytics say, because really, how many of those kicks are and how many of them are successful? Not a lot. So the analytics say, oh, okay, that's not successful, so go for two instead of an onside kick. Well, change that rule then if you want to really spice up the game a little bit.
Well, and I think when we go back to George Carlin also, I think forget injury timeouts. You just run a couple of guys out there with a stretcher, and they pick the guy up and they run off, and then boom, we're right back to the snap.
That's old school right there.
All right, next game up on fantasy.
I mean, I don't have too, again. It's it was the first week of buys. I don't see.
Right. And the Raiders actually happen to have one of those buys this week.
I know what that might bite them in the ass, because that's going to give them a chance to levy a big fine on Devontae Adams, who I have, by the way. And
you think he's going to get suspended?
I think he's going to be suspended.
During my show this morning with my guys, my guy Jim Haig is a former AP writer who knows the sport very well, and he thinks it'll be at least a 4 or 5 game suspension.
Wow.
Because
I didn't think it was going to be that steep. I was thinking more along the lines of maybe a 2-game suspension.
I mean, he is getting charged.
But he is being charged. The Kansas City Metro Police Department has charged him now with misdemeanor assault.
I'd say it's at least a 4-game suspension.
Yeah. At that
point. Guys, real quick. It's a pretty busy police week. You had that. You got Alvin Kamara now is being sued by the guy. He should be seeing a suspension soon. That's getting uglier by the every time they release new information, it gets uglier and uglier. There's no way that guy escapes this one. And then our old buddy, Mr. Massage, another woman's coming out. With
26.
Number 26 is coming out. So
yeah, he's and they're just going to keep coming out because we were talking about that earlier. You know, these women now, I mean, there's so many of them.
There's 60 at least, they say.
Yeah. I mean, when there's that many women and he's had that many massages and he's done this that many times, he's not even he doesn't even know if the girl is telling the truth or just making it up. So all these women, hey guys, let's go out and dress and drag and go hire an attorney and let's all sue Deshaun Watson and get rich.
I mean, if you're a woman who met him in a bar and just took like a selfie fan picture with the guy, and that's all that happened, you can probably sue the guy now because he's, like you said, he's gonna have no idea who you were anyway. Okay, I guess she's one of them. There's no way he remembers all these women that he did this to.
No.
Yeah. He's got a problem, and it's just going to manifest itself more and more and more. And that, you know, what's Cleveland going to do at this point? Cut bait?
Not at all. Fully guaranteed. They don't
they
care.
Can't
it's
cut
Cleveland.
bait, but
it's Cleveland.
It puts them in a tough jam because now the commissioner does the commissioner have to come in here and go, okay, wait a minute, this is a new charge. We have to rethink your suspension.
I don't think they're going to reopen it at all. As long as there's no criminal charges, I think they're done with it.
That could be. Could be. And that's probably, you know, in the way of the league, that's probably exactly what they're going to do.
They just wanted to go away at this point.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. What do you got next for us, Bobby?
Yeah, only a couple more I see. Again, not a lot this week. I mean, Panthers, Rams. Panthers are awful. They fired their coach. You know, this is the one game where if you have some Rams, not Cam Akers, I believe he's out. You want to start them. Bengals, Saints. I know a lot of people like myself picked up Taysom Hill this week because he had that phenomenal gadget game where he scored 4 touchdowns and recovered a fumble on a kickoff or something. So, you know, you're hoping he has a pretty decent game for you. The Bengals, you know what? As much as they wanted to do so, their line is not improved, which is hurting, you know, Burrow and the receivers. They're having some great stretches, but not a complete, you know, mastery of the game as you see with KC and Buffalo.
The Bengals just need to play the Dolphins every week because our defensive line couldn't get past them at all.
I didn't understand that. Worst offensive line in the league, and you can't get any pressure?
None whatsoever. I think we get 1 sack on
Melvin
Burrow
Ingram leads the team in sacks right now, and I think he's got 1.5. We're not getting to the quarterback or forcing turnovers.
No.
Nothing.
No.
And 1 or 2 more games, Ravens, Giants. Saquon Barkley is off to a phenomenal start in a contract.
Which is helping Daniel Jones, by the way, big time.
Yeah. The Ravens, you know, Lamar Jackson. I don't know. Giants defense has been quietly okay. So this is a big game for us to begin with because, hey, we're 4-1. We had a big statement win in London. Now it's time for a home statement win. And then Jets, Packers. Aaron Rodgers is not himself either.
No.
You know, he lost his receivers. He has some young guys he's not trusting yet. And which leads me to my one last point this week. A lot of teams are starting to pick up. I mean, fantasy teams are starting to pick up and use Geno Smith. Who would have thunk that 2 months ago when the season started?
Geno Smith today.
Wow. You know, anybody that ever told me people were going to be picking up Geno Smith in their fantasy teams, I would have said you're high.
To be their savior. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow.
Well, that's it for this week for me.
All right. Well, I guess that brings us to the wrap up, and it's time to make our predictions. What we think is going to happen Sunday afternoon at Hard Rock Stadium. Rodney, we're going to go to you first, and tell us what you see happening on Sunday between the Dolphins and the Vikings.
Well, a lot's going to come down to the offensive line protecting Skylar Thompson, but I expect them to do a heavy dose of Raheem Mostert to, you know, take a little pressure off him. And we got guys like Hill and Waddle that can make a lot of things happen after the catch. So he doesn't necessarily need to go down the field to these guys. So I think the key, though, is going to be the defense. You know, they're going to have to slow Jamar Chase, Dalvin Cook, and our defense has been very subpar. You know, we have 1 interception, and that was in the first game on a deflected pass. We're not getting turnovers. You know, we need to get turnovers. That's going to help the offense out, give them more chances.
as you said, yeah, the turnovers are the key, and we aren't getting them. But then again, last year, when we started out in that bad start last year, we weren't getting the turnovers last year either, and it was a key thing for us. We were able to overcome that a little bit in the first 3 games. But what's your take on that, bearing in mind what Rodney just said about how we're not getting any of the turnovers?
Well, I think the reason we're not getting a lot of turnovers is the same thing like last year. We didn't start getting the turnovers until we started blitzing with that zero coverage defense. And if you don't have the corners that can play man and you got to play a lot more zone, you can't blitz as much.
Well, and the thing that I'm sitting here and I'm looking at it, Rodney, you and I have talked about this before, and it was no big giant secret that when the defense started playing well last year, it was reported that Coach Flores had taken over the defensive play calling from Josh Boyer. Josh Boyer is retained by this coaching staff to be the defensive coordinator, and we're starting to see the same issues that we had last year because the scheme we're not doing the right scheme week in and week out. And some of the coverages that we are using and some of the packages we are using is these are the NFL teams have seen this. They know what's coming. We're not disguising it.
Well, I think the scheme is switched up a bit now that we don't have Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. You can't run the zero coverage. Can't run that right now.
No, you can't run that right now.
And our sacks rely on good man coverage.
Yeah.
We don't have defensive linemen that just go there and get it.
Well, and then when you have Xavier Howard being banged up the way that he is, that doesn't help either, because that hurt us in the Cincinnati game. And I think that John and I think all of us here, I think we realized that Cincinnati game was certainly the one that the position that we're put in to have to play on such a short week, that was a game we could afford to lose so that we get guys healthy, so that when we get into December, when we get into January, hopefully we're healthy and not, because if we don't maintain the health, we're not going to get into January.
Exactly.
Rodney, come back to us with what's your score prediction for Sunday?
I think they're going to rise to the occasion. I see them winning 24-20.
All right, I'm gonna sign off the show with my predictions. So Jonathan, we're gonna come to you. What's your total prediction? How do you think the game's gonna play out? With Skylar being able to do the job that we need him to do, Mostert stepping up to the plate. What do you see, and what's your final score prediction?
I think we're going to establish the run. I think Skylar needs to be a game manager, not try to force the ball, and just get the ball into the playmaker's hands. I think we're going to come out on top, and I'm pretty close to what he said. 24-21 is what I was going with.
All right. Well, all right. So I've been thinking about this all week, and I think that with a week of repetitions with the first unit and getting a chance to really get his timing down with not only Waddle but also Hill and Mostert and everybody else that we've got in there, I think I want to see the Dolphins help Skylar Thompson out a little bit this week and get the ball. Let's get Mike Gesicki involved a little bit more in this. Gesicki is the type of guy that could give a guy like Skylar Thompson an awful lot of confidence in the game, because you can throw the ball up in the vicinity of Mike and he's going to come down with it 9 times out of 10. Mm-hmm. And those can be game-changing plays. They can be huge confidence boosters for a young quarterback, especially a kid who's a 7th-round draft pick rookie. All right. The kid's got all the tools. John and I were talking about this earlier this week. This kid's got all the tools. He can make the throws. He can make every single play. We want to get Mostert started early, control the ground game, control the clock, chew the time off of that clock completely. And then that opens up the play action passing. Get the tight end involved, and not just the tight end. Let's get Mike Gesicki involved, because let's face it, he's the best pass catching tight end, I think, right now, other than Travis Kelce in the National Football League.
Yeah, if you can get him involved.
Okay, so we've got to get him involved. Show everybody and show Coach McDaniel he does have some worth. Okay, because I'm not liking where it looks like they're going with Gesicki at this point. It was looking like we approached the trade deadline. He may be on that list. And I don't like that. I like the kid too much, and I'm like, okay, Mike, I understand that your offense works a certain way, and you want the tight end to be able to block.
Durham Smythe really fits that too.
But let's let Durham Smythe be that blocking guy, and we could still use Mike Gesicki as a decoy sometimes, and have him like go off on a block, then come off the block. Yeah, put him in the slot, or come off of the block and go out and catch a pass over the middle with a middle flood. So anyway, I think the defense is going to step up. I think Kirk Cousins is going to make those mistakes that we always know that he can make. They're in Miami. It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. We know that the Dolphins always stick the opposing team over there in the baking sun.
Oh,
and I think we're just going to see a really different game from Skylar Thompson, because he's had a chance to work with the first unit. And my score prediction, Miami Dolphins 24, Minnesota Vikings 21.
wow. So we're all pretty much on the same page here.
I had already decided that. I don't even remember who I was talking to the other day. They
I
asked
wrote
me,
it
I said,
down earlier.
do you think that the Dolphins are going to pull it out? And I think I don't often agree with him, but when I do, we're usually like spot on. I agreed with Mike Florio. He also picked the Dolphins 24-21.
Did he really?
Yeah.
I think McDaniels is going to draw up a game plan that's going to really suit Skylar Thompson. He's going to give him plays that are going to work for him. And I think you're going to see a heavy dose of Raheem Mostert for sure.
He has to do that, and that's partly the reason why you saw Skylar Thompson struggling last week, was because the game plan wasn't to his strengths.
Yeah.
But they didn't know how to change it up in the game without creating an even worse problem. And let's face it, people, we were in that game with 9 minutes to go.
Yeah.
And if not for an interception and a missed field goal, I mean, the game, NFL games can turn on one possession, on one play. And we just had a couple of things that went against us, and we'd already had so many things going against us the whole game, starting with Spottergate, and then going on from there. So, all right, guys, we got about 3 minutes left. Rodney, take about a minute. Tell us your final thoughts.
Well, like I said, I think they're going to rise to the occasion. I think they're going to get out of that turnover rut. I think they're going to create a couple turnovers. Take the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hands a little bit, which is going to, lead to a little less scoring on their part. And I think the warm weather and the home field is going to really help out Skylar Thompson. We're going to get the win.
All right, Jonathan.
Oh, I'm hoping that Xavier Howard can really lock up Justin Jefferson, or at least try to maintain him a bit. And if we can establish that run with Raheem Mostert, that'll soften the coverage, open up some play action. Can really get that ball into playmakers' hands.
And that's going to be the key. And I think if the defense can step up this week, they're going to have to step up. They've got to step up and make the plays. We need to get some turnovers. We need to force it, and just we need to play lights out. And if it means that McDaniel needs to go ahead and kind of put on his defensive hat a little bit, veto some of the coverages that Josh Boyer's throwing in there and say, no, I don't like it, but not with this down and distance, not on this hash mark, not in this field position. And he needs to change it, because I just don't, I think that Josh Boyer, I mean, obviously he knows a lot from having worked with Brian Flores in New England, but I don't think that he has, for whatever reason, he just doesn't have it. When it comes to calling the game during the game.
It's hard to play the same scheme if you don't have Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, because you got Cater Kahoo, Crosen, and Nick Needham. We're all better off in the slot that aren't true lockdown man corners.
It is a little bit of a problem, but when you make it, you make adjustments for other things in the game.
Yeah.
And so you can't, he's trying to play the same type of coverage that he would if you had Byron Jones there, and if you had Xavier Howard fully healthy. So you got to change it up, just like you got to change it up for the quarterback who's coming in. He has a totally different skill set, totally different mindset when it comes to football, and you have to change up the offensive game plan. So I think that's what they need to think about, and I think that's what Brian Flores thought last year when he took over the reins. He saw what our team was capable of doing, but we weren't putting them in a position to be able to make those plays, and so he took that over. But I do think we're going to see a much better game. I think it's going to be a nail biter. Obviously, you and I both said 24-21, so it's going to be very close. It's going to come down right to the very end, and it's going to be a turnover or something like that. But hopefully, we can get it done this week. Get back into the win column, and we'll be 4-2 when we start talking to everybody next week. Right back here on DolFan Radio. I'm Brad Michaels, along with Rodney Quick, and right here in studio with me tonight is our new co-host, Jonathan Elliott. Guys, thank you very much. Great having you, and we'll see you guys next week. We'll see you next week right here on DolFan Radio, hopefully with a check mark in the W column.
You know it.
Yes, sir.